Young black woman helps blind elderly man at train station. Next day, she learns his true identity. The train station was crowded that evening. People rushed in all directions, their footsteps echoing loudly against the tiled floor. Some carried heavy bags, some spoke hurriedly on their phones, and others simply pushed past one another, each person in a race against time. In the middle of all that noise and motion, Amara walked with her own tired steps. She had just finished a long day at work, and her body felt heavy. Her only wish was to reach home quickly, to eat a warm meal, and to rest her aching feet. She adjusted the strap of her bag on her shoulder and looked at the train schedule board. The bright letters flickered, announcing arrivals and departures. Her train was due to leave in 10 minutes. With a sigh of relief, she thought she would reach the platform in time. But as she moved through the crowd, something caught her attention. An elderly man stood near the staircase that led down to the platforms. He held a white cane in his hand and seemed to be struggling. His cane tapped against the floor slowly, but the people around him were too hurried to notice. They brushed past him without stopping, their faces focused only on their own paths. The man lifted his head slightly, his unseeing eyes searching for direction. For a moment, his face showed confusion, maybe even worry. Amara slowed her steps. She looked around, expecting someone else to stop, but no one did. Everyone was in too much of a rush. Her train would arrive soon, but her heart tugged at her. She couldn't just walk past him. Taking a small breath, she stepped toward him. "Excuse me, sir," she said softly. "Do you need some help?" The elderly man turned his face toward her voice. A faint smile touched his lips, and he nodded. "Yes, thank you. I was trying to find the ticket counter. It seems the station has changed since I was last here. Would you be kind enough to guide me?" Amara felt her heart soften. "Of course," she said. "Please, may I offer you my arm?" He gently placed his hand on her arm, his touch light and careful, as if he didn't want to trouble her. Together they began to walk through the crowd. Amara guided him slowly, making sure he didn't bump into anyone or anything. She noticed how his cane tapped gently at each step, though he trusted her lead. When they reached the counter, she asked him what ticket he needed. He explained in a calm voice, and Amara purchased it for him. She placed the ticket carefully into his hand, closing his fingers around it. "Thank you, my dear," he said warmly. "I hope it wasn't too much trouble." "Not at all," she replied with a smile. "I was headed this way anyway." As they walked toward the platform, she found herself curious about him. His voice was steady, filled with a kind of quiet dignity. He didn't complain about his blindness, nor did he show impatience. Instead, he carried himself with grace, even as he leaned gently on her arm for guidance. When they reached the train, she helped him step up carefully. She guided him to a seat near the door and made sure he was comfortable. The train was beginning to fill, and people jostled for space, but she stayed by his side until she knew he was settled. Before the doors closed, the elderly man turned his face toward her once more. "You have been very kind," he said softly. "In this busy world, not many pause to notice. May life bless you for your kindness." His words were simple, but they touched Amara deeply. She smiled, though she knew he could not see it. "Take care, sir. Have a safe journey." The train doors closed, and the carriage slowly began to move. Amara stood on the platform for a moment, watching it roll away. Around her, the crowd continued to rush, each person hurrying toward their own destination. Yet, in the middle of all that movement, Amara felt still. She turned and began walking toward her own train, her mind replaying what had just happened. The elderly man's calm smile, his gentle words, and the light weight of his hand on her arm stayed with her. She realized that she hadn't just helped someone reach his train, something about that moment had reached into her heart as well. On her own train ride home, she sat by the window and watched the city lights blur past. People around her were busy with their phones or staring blankly at the floor, but Amara kept thinking about the man. She wondered what his life was like, how he managed each day without his sight, and whether he had someone waiting for him at the end of his journey. She didn't know his story, but she felt that meeting him had given her a quiet reminder that kindness mattered, even if no one else noticed. By the time she reached her stop, her body was still tired, but her spirit felt lighter. As she walked home through the quiet streets, the sound of the elderly man's blessing echoed gently in her heart. She didn't know then that this simple choice to pause and help would change the course of her own life in ways she could not yet imagine. On her way home that night, Amara kept replaying the moment at the train station in her mind. She had not planned for her day to end in such a way. Work had been tiring, and her only wish was to get home quickly, eat something warm, and rest her body. Yet the image of the elderly man with the white cane lingered in her thoughts. His gentle face, the way his hand had slightly trembled when she placed the ticket in his palm, and the calm but grateful smile he had given her, all of it stayed with her like a picture she could not set aside. She sat on the bus near the window, watching the city lights blur into long golden lines as the bus moved. People around her were busy with their phones, some talking to each other, others half asleep from the long day. But her mind was somewhere else. She thought about how easily people had walked past him, as if he were invisible. She remembered the way the crowd had split in two, each person rushing to their own destination, unwilling to slow down even for a moment. For a second she wondered if she too might have walked past him had she been in a bigger hurry. The thought made her uncomfortable, and she quickly shook her head. No, she believed her heart would not have allowed her to ignore him. When the bus finally reached her stop, she stepped down and walked slowly toward her home. The streets were quieter here, with small shops closing down for the night. The soft glow of lamps fell on the sidewalks, and the cool night breeze touched her skin. As she walked, she found herself smiling without realizing it. There was a warmth in her chest that she had not felt in a long time, a quiet satisfaction that she had done something meaningful, even if it was small. At home, her mother was sitting on the sofa with a light blanket wrapped around her shoulders. She was watching a family drama on television, but when Amara entered, she turned her head with a welcoming smile. "You're late today," her mother said gently. Amara placed her bag on the chair and sat beside her. "Yes, the train was crowded. But something happened today." She paused, searching for the right words. Her mother lowered the volume and gave her full attention, as she always did when Amara wanted to talk. "There was an old man at the station," Amara began. "He was blind and seemed lost. No one stopped to help him. Everyone was just walking by, busy with their own lives. I don't know why, but I couldn't ignore him. So I guided him, helped him get his ticket, and made sure he boarded safely. He thanked me so kindly, Mama." His words, they felt like a blessing. Her mother's face softened as she listened. "That is a beautiful thing you did, Amara. Not many people pause for others these days. Everyone is in such a rush, but you stopped. That shows who you are inside." Amara lowered her eyes shyly. She did not see it as something extraordinary, but her mother's words made her feel proud in a quiet way. "It was just the right thing to do," she whispered. "Yes, but remember," her mother said, placing a hand on hers, "kindness may look small on the outside, but in truth, it is never small. A smile, a helping hand, a gentle word, they all have power. You don't know what that man felt inside because of you. You may have lifted his whole day, maybe even his whole week." Amara thought about that. She pictured the man sitting on the train, holding his cane, maybe thinking of the moment when a stranger had stopped for him. She hoped he had felt comforted, that he had reached his destination without worry. That night, while preparing for bed, Amara found her thoughts circling back again. She lay on her pillow, but instead of sleeping, she stared at the ceiling and thought deeply. The world was filled with so many people, millions walking around, each with their own worries. And yet sometimes, lives touched for just a moment, like hers had touched his. She wondered how many times in her life she had walked past someone who needed help, simply because she had been too busy or distracted. The more she thought, the more she realized how important it was to notice people. Not just to look at them, but to truly see them. The old man had reminded her of something her grandmother used to say, "The eyes may not see, but the heart always feels." That memory comforted her as sleep finally pulled her into its soft arms. The next morning, Amara woke up earlier than usual. As she made her breakfast, she still felt the glow of yesterday's moment inside her. The sunlight coming through the window seemed brighter, and her tea tasted warmer. Even at work, when the tasks piled up, she noticed she was calmer than before. Her colleagues seemed surprised at her cheerful mood. During lunch, she shared the story with one of her friends at work. Her friend listened and then said, "You know, it's rare these days. Most people don't have the patience for others. You did something beautiful, Amara. You should feel good about it." Amara smiled, but deep down, she wondered if her friend was right. Was it really so rare to help someone? She wished it wasn't. She wished kindness was as common as rushing footsteps in a station. That evening, she walked home again with her headphones playing soft music. The city around her felt different now, almost as if it had slowed down. She noticed a child holding her father's hand, laughing as they crossed the street. She noticed a vendor giving a free piece of fruit to an old customer. Little acts, quiet moments. Suddenly she was more aware of them than before. Her mind kept returning to the man's face, the way his smile had carried both weariness and warmth. She did not know who he was, but she felt he had given her a gift, even though she had been the one to help him. It was as if the universe had quietly placed a lesson in her path, and she had been fortunate enough to notice. Days passed, but the memory did not fade. Instead, it grew stronger, shaping her thoughts and her way of seeing the world. At night, when she prayed before sleeping, she found herself whispering not just for her own family, but also for the old man, hoping he was safe and cared for. Amara did not know it yet, but this single act of kindness, this brief crossing of paths, would lead to something far greater than she could imagine. For now, she only felt a quiet joy and a sense of peace that came from knowing she had done the right thing. And somewhere deep inside her, without words, she understood that life had a way of connecting hearts in the most unexpected places. White heavy checkmark word count, 1310, simple English, reflective E. Next morning, Amara woke up with the same calm feeling she had carried since that night at the station. She made herself breakfast and scrolled casually through her phone as she sipped her tea. The usual news updates filled her screen: politics, sports, entertainment, weather reports. Nothing unusual. She was just about to close the app when a familiar face caught her eye. Her hand froze on the screen. She leaned closer to make sure she wasn't imagining it. There, in a photo at the center of a local news article, was the same elderly man she had helped at the train station. His white cane was visible beside him, and though the picture was more formal, she immediately recognized the calm, kind expression she had seen up close just a day earlier. Her heart skipped. "It's him," she whispered. She quickly tapped the article, curiosity rising inside her like a wave. The headline read, "Community Honors Retired Professor for Lifelong Service to Education." As she read, her eyes widened in surprise. The article described him as Professor James Caldwell, a respected teacher who had spent over 40 years in education. He had guided hundreds of young students through their studies, many of whom had gone on to build successful careers. But what struck Amara most was not just his long teaching career, it was what he had done after his retirement. The article explained that even after losing his eyesight a few years earlier, Professor Caldwell had continued to mentor students. He had started a small foundation that offered scholarships to underprivileged children, especially those who dreamed of going to college but lacked the means. Quietly, without seeking fame, he had changed the lives of many. His former students had gathered recently to honor him, and that was why his story was being featured in the news. Amara set her phone down for a moment and just stared into the distance. Her mind replayed their meeting, the way he had stumbled slightly on the steps, the quiet gratitude in his voice when she guided him, the blessing he had spoken softly before leaving. She realized then that she had unknowingly helped a man who had spent his entire life helping others. Her heart filled with both wonder and humility. She had thought of him as a stranger, someone she would probably never see again, but now she understood that their brief meeting carried more weight than she had imagined. She thought of all the students who had passed through his care, all the young people who had been lifted because of him. And yet, at the station, he had seemed so ordinary, almost invisible in the rush of the crowd. She whispered to herself, he gave so much, and no one even knew yesterday. They just walked past him. For the rest of the morning, Amara found it hard to focus on her daily routine. Even at work, her mind kept returning to the article. She wanted to know more. She looked up other stories about him during her lunch break and discovered even more details. Years ago, he had fought for better resources in public schools. He had raised funds so children from poor families could have books, uniforms, and even meals. Some of his former students spoke of him as a second father, someone who not only taught them lessons from textbooks but also taught them how to believe in themselves. One story especially touched her. A young man explained how Professor Caldwell had noticed his struggles at home when his father had fallen sick. Instead of letting the boy drop out, the professor had arranged part-time work for him and even helped cover his exam fees. That boy had later become a lawyer, and he credited all his success to the professor's care. Amara's eyes grew wet as she read. She felt proud to have met him, even if only briefly. She thought of her own life, of how her mother had always pushed her to study hard, to believe that education was the path forward. Now she felt connected to this man in a way she could not explain. That evening, as she walked home from the bus stop, she noticed the world differently. The streets were the same, the shops the same, but she felt as if she was carrying a secret knowledge that made everything brighter. She thought of how easily people judge others by appearance. If the crowd at the station had known who he was, perhaps they all would have rushed to help him. But when they saw only an old man with a cane, they turned away. Amara shook her head softly. It shouldn't matter who someone is, she thought. Kindness should be given without asking who they are first. Later, while sitting at the dining table with her mother, she shared the news. "Mama, do you remember the man I told you about yesterday? The one I helped at the station?" Her mother nodded. "Yes, the blind gentleman." Amara's voice rose with excitement. "I saw his photo today in the news. He's not just anyone, Mama. He's a retired professor, a man who has done so much for students. He even started a foundation to help poor children go to school. All these years, he has been changing lives quietly." Her mother's eyes widened in surprise and then softened with pride. "How amazing! You see, Amara, life always places us where we are meant to be. You were meant to meet him. Maybe it is not just chance." Amara smiled, though her heart was heavy with thoughts. "It makes me wonder how many great people walk among us every day without us realizing. We don't see them because they don't carry fame or wealth on their faces. But their lives touch so many." That night, sleep did not come easily. Amara lay awake, imagining the professor's journey. She pictured him in classrooms filled with children, guiding them with patience. She imagined him sitting late into the night, working on scholarship papers, even when his eyesight began to fail. She thought about his strength, how he never gave up his mission even when life made things harder. As her thoughts drifted, she felt inspired. She wondered what her own life could mean beyond her daily job. Could she, too, make a difference in someone's life? Could she carry even a small piece of the same spirit that he had carried all his years? The next morning, when she stepped outside for work, the air felt fresher, the sun brighter. She walked with a new energy in her steps. Deep in her heart, she knew her story with the professor was not over yet. The world had shown her a glimpse of something greater, and she felt that somehow, their paths would cross again. And though she did not yet know how or when, she carried with her the feeling that life was leading her towards something meaningful. What she thought had been a passing encounter at a train station was slowly turning into the beginning of a new chapter in her own journey. The week passed quietly, but Amara could not shake the thought of Professor Caldwell. Every evening, when she returned from work, she would glance at her phone again, sometimes rereading the same articles she had already seen. It amazed her how someone so extraordinary could appear so ordinary in a crowded place. She thought of his calm voice, his polite smile, and the way he had blessed her as he stepped onto the train. To her, it had felt like just a moment of kindness, but now she realized it was a moment that connected her to a much bigger story. On Thursday afternoon, while she was finishing her work, her phone rang. It was an unknown number. For a moment, she thought about ignoring it, but something inside told her to pick up. "Hello," she answered softly. A gentle female voice spoke from the other side. "Is this Amara Williams?" "Yes, it is," Amara replied, a little confused. "This is the station office," the voice explained kindly. "I hope you don't mind me calling. A gentleman you helped the other day left a message with us. He asked if we could try to reach you. He wanted to thank you again. Would you be open to meeting him?" Amara froze, her heart thumping in her chest. "You mean Professor Caldwell?" she asked quickly. "Yes," the woman said with a smile in her tone. "He said a young woman helped him, and he hoped to see her again. If you're comfortable, we can arrange a meeting at a cafe near the station this weekend." Amara agreed almost instantly. After the call ended, she sat at her desk in silence, her mind racing. She had not expected this at all. She thought their encounter was over, just a fleeting moment in time. But now, she was going to see him again, this time, not as a stranger, but as someone she admired deeply. Saturday morning arrived with a clear sky. Amara dressed carefully, choosing a simple but neat outfit. She wanted to show respect, but she also wanted to be herself. On the way to the cafe, her nerves fluttered like tiny birds inside her chest. She kept thinking of what she would say. Would she tell him how much his story had inspired her? Would she confess that she had read about him and now looked at him with admiration? She wasn't sure. The cafe was small and quiet, with soft music playing and the smell of freshly brewed coffee filling the air. As she entered, she immediately noticed him. Professor Caldwell was seated near the window, his white cane resting against the table. Though his eyes could not see, he sat with dignity, his back straight, his hands folded calmly on the table. Amara walked toward him slowly, her heart pounding with every step. The moment she reached his table, he lifted his head slightly, as if he sensed her presence before she spoke. "Professor Caldwell," she said gently. He turned his face toward her voice, and a warm smile spread across his lips. "Amara," he said, her name rolling off his tongue as if he had practiced it. "I am so glad you came." She sat down across from him, feeling both shy and honored. "I'm glad to see you again too, sir." The waitress came to take their order. Amara chose tea, while the professor ordered coffee. Once they were alone again, he leaned slightly forward. "I wanted to thank you," he said. "That day at the station, your kindness touched me more than you can imagine. People often pass by, not out of cruelty, but because life makes them hurry. But you stopped. You saw me." Amara's eyes softened. I didn't know who you were that day, she admitted. I just wanted to help. Later, I saw your story in the news. I was surprised to learn all that you've done for people. It made me feel like our meeting was not by chance. He chuckled softly, a sound filled with warmth. I am only a teacher, my dear. Nothing more, nothing less. Titles and honors don't matter much now. What matters are the hearts we touch. That day, you touched mine. Even a teacher sometimes needs to be reminded that kindness still exists in the world. Amara felt her throat tighten with emotion. She had thought she was the one who should admire him, but here he was, praising her. For a moment, she could not speak. She simply nodded, her eyes shining. They began to talk more, and the minutes slipped away unnoticed. Professor Caldwell shared stories from his teaching days about students who had doubted themselves but later achieved more than they imagined, about nights he spent correcting essays by candlelight because he wanted to give every child feedback, about his belief that education was not just about books but about building character. Amara listened with wide eyes, absorbing every word. She found herself laughing when he told funny stories of mischievous children, and her heart grew heavy when he spoke of the struggles many faced just to stay in school. At one point, she asked quietly, "Professor, what kept you going all those years? Didn't you ever feel tired?" He paused thoughtfully. Of course, I felt tired. There were days I wondered if my efforts mattered at all. But then, one child would come back with a smile, or a letter would arrive from a former student saying, "You changed my life." Those little reminders kept me moving. You see, Amara, one act of kindness, one word of encouragement, can plant a seed that grows for years. That is what kept me going. Amara's heart swelled as she listened. She thought of her own life, her own doubts, and how often she questioned if her work mattered. His words gave her a new perspective. The cafe around them grew busier, but to Amara, it felt like the world had gone silent, leaving only their conversation alive. She realized she could sit here all day, listening to him. He was more than a teacher, he was a well of wisdom, and she felt grateful to drink from it. As their meeting neared its end, Professor Caldwell reached across the table and placed his hand gently on hers. His touch was steady, filled with warmth. "Amara," he said softly, "life brought us together for a reason. I believe in the power of moments, and I believe you were meant to remind me, just as I was meant to remind you. Do not underestimate yourself. You carry light, and the world needs that." Amara felt her eyes grow moist. She squeezed his hand gently. "Thank you, sir. I don't know what I've done to deserve these words, but I promise I will carry them in my heart." When they finally rose to leave, she walked him outside, guiding him to the curb where his driver waited. Before stepping into the car, he turned his face toward her one last time. "We will meet again, Amara," he said with certainty. "And when we do, I hope to hear how you've shared your light with others." She watched the car drive away, her heart full. She knew this was not the end but a beginning. Their paths had crossed for a reason, and her life, she felt, was about to change in ways she could not yet see. As she walked home under the soft evening sky, she carried with her not just admiration for the professor but a new fire within her. She had met someone who embodied kindness, wisdom, and perseverance. And now, she wanted to live in a way that would honor the lesson he had given her. That night, when she closed her eyes, she did not simply see the train station or the cafe. She saw a path stretching forward, a path lit by small acts of kindness, waiting for her to walk upon it. White heavy checkmark word count, 1315, smooth, emotional, heart-to-heart style, in simple English. In the weeks after their meeting at the cafe, Amara found her life slowly shifting. She still went to work each morning, still rode the same bus and walked the same streets, but everything around her felt different. She carried Professor Caldwell's words inside her like a small flame that lit her thoughts, and no matter how ordinary the day seemed, that flame reminded her there was more to life than rushing from one task to another. One evening, as she scrolled through her messages, she saw an email from a local community center. They were looking for volunteers to join a literacy program for children who struggled with reading. The name of the program caught her eye instantly: the Caldwell Foundation Literacy Project. Her heart leapt. Without a second thought, she clicked the link and signed up. A week later, she found herself standing in a small, brightly painted room filled with children's books, pencils, and little wooden tables. The smell of paper and crayons floated in the air. She felt nervous at first, wondering if she could really help. But when a little girl tugged at her sleeve and asked shyly if she could read a story aloud, Amara's heart softened. She knelt down beside the child, opened the book, and together they began to read word by word, sentence by sentence. The hours passed quickly, and by the end of her first day, Amara realized she had not thought about her phone, her work deadlines, or even the time. She had been fully present with the children, and their smiles had filled her with a sense of joy she had not felt in a long time. On her way home that evening, she thought of Professor Caldwell. She understood now what he meant when he said that one word of encouragement could plant a seed that grows for years. The following weekend, she met him again at the foundation's office. When she told him she had joined the literacy program, his face lit up with pride. "Ah," he said warmly, "you see, Amara, kindness multiplies. You gave me kindness, and now you are giving it to others. That is how the world changes." They began meeting more often after that. Sometimes they sat in the quiet garden of the foundation, where the sound of birds filled the air, and he told her about the challenges of his younger years. Other times they sat indoors, surrounded by books and letters from former students who still wrote to him with gratitude. Amara listened carefully, her notebook often resting on her lap as she scribbled down words of wisdom he shared. One afternoon, as they sat together, she asked him a question that had been in her mind for days. "Professor, do you ever feel sad that people at the station, or in the world in general, don't always see you for who you are? That they only see a blind man, not the teacher and leader you have been?" He chuckled softly. "My dear, at first, when I lost my sight, I did feel invisible. It was painful. But then I realized, why should I measure my worth by what strangers see in a hurry? My life is not defined by passing glances. It is defined by the lives I touched, the hearts I reached. And those who truly know me, they see me clearly even without my eyes." Amara felt tears sting her eyes. His words gave her strength not only for herself but also for how she saw others. She promised herself that from now on, she would try to look beyond the surface, beyond appearances. As weeks turned into months, Amara became more involved with the foundation. She helped organize book drives, tutored children, and even spoke to young volunteers about her experience at the station. Each time she spoke, she reminded them that kindness often begins with something small, but it can ripple outward in ways we may never imagine. Through these experiences, Amara herself began to grow. Her confidence deepened, her patience widened, and her sense of purpose became clearer. She no longer thought of kindness as something extra, something to do only when she had time. It became part of her daily life. Professor Caldwell noticed this change in her. One day, as they sat under the shade of a tree in the foundation's garden, he said gently, "Amara, when I first met you, I thought you were just a kind stranger. But now I see you are more than that. You have within you the spirit of a leader. Do not be afraid to guide others one day." His words echoed in her mind long after. She never thought of herself as a leader, but his belief in her planted a new seed. She began to imagine possibilities for her future, maybe starting her own community project, maybe mentoring others just as he had mentored her. One evening, after a long day at the center, Amara walked home slowly under the setting sun. The sky was painted in shades of pink and orange, and the air was cool against her skin. She thought about how much her life had changed in such a short time. Before, her days were routine and predictable. Now, every week felt filled with purpose and connection. She also thought about the station, the place where it all began. She remembered how the crowd had rushed past, how easy it would have been for her to do the same. But she hadn't. She had stopped. That one small choice had opened a door to a path she never expected. Her mother noticed the change too. One night, as they sat together in the living room, her mother said softly, "You are glowing these days, Amara. I see happiness in you. And I think it is because you are giving so much of yourself to others. That is what makes life beautiful." Amara smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her heart. She knew her mother was right. Happiness did not come from rushing toward personal goals alone, it came from sharing light with others. As time went on, her bond with Professor Caldwell grew deeper. Though he could not see her face, he seemed to understand her heart better than anyone else. To Amara, he became more than a mentor, he became family, a guiding star whose wisdom she would carry forever. One afternoon, as they finished a meeting with the volunteers, he leaned on his cane and turned toward her. "Amara," he said gently, "one day, I will not be here. But I know you will continue this work. You will carry the torch forward." She swallowed hard, tears rising in her eyes. "I don't know if I'm strong enough, Professor." He smiled. "Strength is not about never doubting yourself. It is about acting with love even when you doubt. And you already do that." His words sank deep into her heart, and she promised silently to honor them. Months later, as she stood before a group of children reading their first books aloud, she thought of him again. She thought of the train station, of the cane tapping gently on the floor, of the simple blessing he had given her that day. She realized then that blessings have a way of unfolding slowly, like flowers opening in their own time. That moment had blossomed into a new chapter of her life, one filled with meaning. Amara smiled as the children clapped for themselves after finishing a story. She knew now that helping the old man at the station had not been an accident. It had been the beginning of her own journey of kindness, one that she would walk for years to come. And deep inside, she carried the certainty that life had brought her to this place for a reason. The elderly man with the white cane had once needed her help, but in truth, he had given her something far greater. He had shown her the path to her own purpose.